Hello and welcome to Cannabis Marketing Live. I'm Kendra Losi with Moda Marketing, and I am really excited about our session today. Today we are going to be talking with Ashley Picillo, who is the CEO and founder of Point 7 Group. Now, if you guys haven't heard of Ashley, you need to know who she is. If you have heard of her, I know you're as excited as I am for her to be here today talking with us. So today we're going to be covering a couple different topics that you're going to love, but I really want to highlight a couple things about Ashley first. She and her team have worked with operations and cannabis companies around the country. They really focus on the licensing, design, operations, and to really help more than 55 regulated, I'm mixing up my numbers. That's how this works. So she has a certified women-owned cannabis consultancy that's dedicated to cannabis licensing, facility, design, and operations. And not only that, but Ashley is the author of Breaking the Glass Ceiling, Women, Weed, and Business. And it's always times like this where I wish I actually still bought hard copies of books like the ones behind me, because I like to show you what her book looks like. It's awesome. I highly recommend it. But I have it in digital form and no one wants to see me waving around my iPad. So let me bring Ashley in and welcome, Ashley. We're excited to have you here.
Thanks. Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you. Now, today we're going to be talking about the essential steps in creating your cannabis or CBD business strategy, as well as Ashley's going to be sharing with us things you can do to streamline your operations and really hiring for the best team to really help you scale and grow and maintain an awesome company culture. Ashley, I have to ask, can you please tell us a little bit about how you got started and in this industry? It's a great story and I'd love to share it with everybody.
Yeah, I'll give you the quick and dirty version. So prior to getting into the space, I studied business undergrad. I had a number of different career paths in front of me at that point. Most notably, I thought I wanted to go into finance. Turns out that's not where I really belonged. So I was in finance for a little while. I moved into a logistical role and then eventually applied to Teach for America. So I wound up in a teaching environment for a couple of years. I got my graduate degree in curriculum design and education. And then shortly after that ended, I moved back to the East Coast. I was in New York City, very close to moving into a new position running operations for a number of charter schools throughout New York. And strange circumstances brought me to Colorado for a few months before that role was supposed to start. And I guess the rest is history. I wound up participating in a couple of different cannabis events at that point. So this is now the beginning of 2014. Things are pretty exciting in Denver. Denver's just legalized. So there's a lot going on and a lot of new people kind of flooding into the space. And over the period, I guess, of, maybe 6 or 9 months, was able to carve out a couple of different consulting roles for myself before eventually taking over operations, marketing, and sales for a vertically integrated firm in Colorado. So I did that for a few years. And then at the end of, tail end of 2015, kind of recognized that the need for information, learning about the industry, most of that was coming from the East Coast and other parts of the country that were just getting their programs started. And I realized that a lot of those regions really were looking at Colorado for what worked, what didn't work, how do we avoid the mistakes that they made there. And so I launched Point 7 at the end of 2015. So we're officially in our 4th year of business somehow, which is crazy to think about. And yeah, it's been a pretty wild ride since then.
It's such an incredible story. I love hearing how people get to the industry and whatever background people have, it really always helps them in what they're doing, right? So being able to look at, break it down to teach it really helps being able to break it down to see what works and what doesn't work for companies.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, so there's a couple topics I want to cover, and I think they're really important. You guys, I know it's called Cannabis Marketing Live. One thing I really want to highlight and stress is that you cannot, like, you can do the best marketing in the world, but if you don't have a product or service that has a market or that's effective and really doing what it needs to, it's not going to go anywhere. And I'm a firm believer in that everyone has to take part in marketing, and that goes into the employee advocacy and building your right team. And all of these things are part of why Ashley is here today. So, several of the millions of reasons why Ashley is here today. So, okay, to start off with, the first thing is the essential steps in creating your cannabis or CBD business strategy. Ashley, in your experience, as you've worked with all these companies and you've worked actually all over the U.S. in terms of the companies there as well as worldwide, what are the essential steps that you've found that companies need to do to create a successful business strategy?
Yeah. I actually love this question. I'm not sure people love my answer to this question, but I think that the most important part from where I'm sitting anyway, like I said, I studied business. I've worked with lots of companies that are in startup mode. And I think that one of the biggest mistakes that's made is this notion that to start a business, you have to have a super robust business plan. And I absolutely believe that there's a lot of merit to drafting a business plan and getting everything organized in that way. But I don't have a business plan. And if I had written a business plan for what we're doing in 2015, it would have changed, 400 times since then. So I think that one of the things that we run into, especially with groups that are first-time business owners, is this, again, this idea that you need to have a business plan on paper, and then you have to follow that roadmap very, specifically. And in some ways, I think the business plan can become quite dangerous, because I've watched a lot of groups treat that business plan as a very rigid document. And, like I said, if I hadn't pivoted over and over and over again, we wouldn't be in business anymore. So I'm a big proponent of people having an idea, getting a lot of feedback from people that you respect, people that might have complementary skill sets, but be flexible and be very, very willing to throw your own ideas in the trash. Because if you're not willing to do that in this space, you probably shouldn't be in this space, to be honest. It's moving extremely quickly, which, anyone who's watching this is seeing. But I think that success really lies in, your ability to accept feedback, be really honest with yourself, and be willing to throw things away if it's not a good fit. As far as, putting a good business strategy together, I think the other big pillar that is most important out of the gate is really thinking about your team. Whether you're a single founder or you're forming a business with other people, really looking at your skill set, being very critical with yourself and understanding, where your strengths and weaknesses lie. That's a must, especially out of the gate. And, I think that doing that in a very humble way, again, being really honest with yourself is a necessity. It's the only way you'll really be able to bring in the complementary third-party vendors or partners or employees that you'll need to round out those areas where you are a little bit weaker.
Absolutely. I think that, obviously I know that there's some people who are going in for funding and they need to have, the investors expect a business plan. But I think that you make a really good point in terms of, I've seen one-page business plans that are effective and allow flexibility. Yeah. I've seen, hundreds of page business plans where there's, if they don't end up using half of what they put the time together, but I always feel like if you have the goal and the problem you're solving and how you're going, you can figure out the how as you go along, but some of those pieces are critical. I just want to say hi to Jessa, who's here today. Jessa, it's great to see you here. If you guys have any questions as you're watching, please put them in the comments and we will get to them as we go through. And if we don't get to them during the show, we'll come back and circle around and answer them for you later. And we also want to know what state you're coming from. So give us a shout out in terms of where you're coming from. So Ashley is saying pivot, don't need a business plan. And
I think you need, I don't want to discourage people. I think everyone has their own learning process too. And that's important to recognize. For me, I had things sort of mapped out. I wasn't completely flying by the seat of my pants, although it felt like that a lot more than it felt organized sometimes. But I think that, if you're going to go the business plan route, which is totally great, just understand that it's a living document and it's a living process that is supposed to be changing and shifting. And, I think if you're willing to do that and you're just not necessarily married to everything that you put down, you'll wind up with a much stronger product or service in the end. I will say that with a number of the groups we're working with, a couple in Missouri as an example, they're smaller operators, very new to business in general, first time starting a company. We've been recommending a software program called Live Plan.
Awesome.
It's really awesome. It's super intuitive, really easy to use. And the coolest part is that you can actually add collaborators to different sections of the plan. So we're actually developing business plans with a number of our clients. But especially for some of our smaller clients, they're trying to do more of this in-house, whether that's for economical reasons or because they're actually trying to learn about the business that they will potentially be part of. So Live Plan is really interesting because it prompts you to answer questions about your business versus you having to know what parts go where. So for the financial questions, it'll say, are you hiring a chief marketing officer? Oh, you are. What's the salary for that person? Will you be giving them benefits? Yada, yada, yada. It'll ultimately spit out pretty strong financials, especially if you're, getting ready for fundraising.
That's impressive. Yeah, we'll put the link in the comments, you guys, as you're watching that, so you know what tool Ashley is talking about. But it's those types of tools that are so smart now that make some of that planning and processes so important. And it's one of those things where I think that even if you don't put it in a formal business plan, to go through the process and think through these things are often critical. But sometimes people get lost in the planning versus the doing. So it's a fine line there.
Yeah.
I want to go back to something you said too, in that one of the things that you mentioned is don't be afraid to let go of ideas that aren't working. And I think I want to say Stephen King, but I think it's just the nature of the quote that makes me want to say Stephen King. So don't assume that that's him. But in all the writing classes and all the things that I've done, one of the things that's common is they call it, don't be afraid to kill your children, right? You get so attached to an idea.
Yeah.
And if it's not working, let it go, because it's not going to help you and it's just going to hold you back.
Totally.
I don't
and
love
in business. I think founders run into that a lot. The phrase in business is founders. What is it? Founders. I'm totally spacing, but it's this notion that as a founder, you can't really give up the reins at some point and maybe can't recognize, it might be founder's dilemma, but it's basically this concept that, you at some point, and I think I'm actually experiencing this in current time, can become the bottleneck in your own business, because the business has the potential, if you've set it up the right way, it can outgrow you, and there are people that are going to be more skilled than you are in different areas. So when you start a company, as you know, as I know, as a lot of people out there listening probably know, you are doing all the jobs, right? You're playing HR, graphic design. I was a little bit of marketing, a little bit of finance. You're doing everything from the bottom to the top. Nothing is beneath you when you're a founder. But as you grow a business and you think about scaling, it can be a little bit uncomfortable. And sometimes it's a subconscious thing you don't even realize you're doing, that you're still grabbing things that are, I don't like to use the word below your pay grade ever. I'll do anything that needs to happen on a given day, but you do need to scale and to lead effectively. You have to give up the reins at some point. And I think that can be very difficult for people, especially getting going. Absolutely.
Because you want to play to your expertise and you want to hire people. Well, we'll get to that. You want to hire people that can help support that. I just want to say hello to Jolie, who's here from Chicago as well. Hi, Jolie.
Hi, Jolie.
And so when people are creating their business strategy or plan, or even thinking through their process and what they need, do you see people in this industry, and whether it's cannabis or CBD or whichever aspect of it on the spectrum of products and services and what they can offer in the industry, do you see the key things that people tend to overlook that you think are important?
In the business plan development process,
getting.
I think there's almost always a lot of errors and oversight, in my opinion, when it comes to the financials. That's critically important, obviously. I mean, I'll go ahead and say I didn't fundraise for this business, and I did not have like a nest egg by any means when I started this company. So depending on what you're going to do, if you're going to move down a service path where you have pretty low overhead going out of the gate, you can probably pull that off. But I think that especially in this industry where you have to prepare for a lot of unknowns. And I think for smaller operators, just getting going, whether they're thinking about retail or product development or cultivation, some of the models that we see they're strong in the sense that they're covering the hard costs that we know should be there. So they're covering design and build and, basic licensing costs, some personnel costs, but there's not a rainy day fund for the most part. And I can't really stress that enough. If you're thinking about getting into this from a licensing side of things and not the ancillary side, you really need that cushion because, there's things that are completely out of your hands. I think one of the best examples is the Illinois licensing process that happened a number of years ago where they permitted all of these teams, but the conditions that were approved under their medical marijuana program were it was a pretty short list. So the patient numbers didn't really climb for a long time, and it put all of those license holders in jeopardy. And it was interesting and kind of ironic at the time because it was one of the most coveted licenses to get. And in the end, a lot of those businesses were in serious trouble because the program really didn't live up to the expectations that they expected. So, at that level, you've got to be prepared. If you've left yourself just enough to get through a few months, you can wind up in a pretty dangerous position. So I think that the financials are huge. And then the other piece that, people, especially founders that are thinking, I can do a lot of this. I'm operating on a budget. I've got to absorb as much as I can. That's true. But I can't stress enough the importance of having great legal counsel and an excellent accountant, because those are the things that you need to invest in from the beginning. They're super important to your growth, and they're the things that will ultimately protect you from greater issues down the road.
No, that's totally true. And your example of Illinois is really interesting. I hadn't heard that. When you said that, I was thinking of all the packaging changes in California in the past year.
Yeah, absolutely.
There were
so many. Example, yeah.
There were so many companies that were struggling because California kept changing its packaging laws.
Yeah.
And people.
Or all the license holders in California that are under temporary licensing and basically not allowed to participate in the marketplace right now. So, that's a situation where a lot of those groups did every single thing that they were told to do, and they're still in a horrible, horrible position right now. So, that the notion that you plan for the unexpected, that's a given in any industry and for any company, but it's on steroids in cannabis because it's not if, it's when that there will be curveballs for all operators, all license types, ancillary or not, because everyone's affected by it. I mean, we specialize in licensing, facility design, all these things. If our clients are struggling, which they are in California, we're struggling because, we're directly tied to that. I mean, we have a little more flexibility because we're serving, an international market, and we can kind of pivot our attention, but we feel the effects of it too. So I think that that's a huge piece. Do not underestimate your capital requirements in this space, especially if you're pursuing licensure.
I'm really glad you said that. That's really important. So thank you for the detail around that as well and the examples. I want to say hi to Lisa, who's here from Oregon as well, in Willamette Valley. So it's fun to see everyone from all over the country covered here, you guys. So as we start to look at, so it's interesting because we're really in this session talking about building and scaling your business, right? From building your plan and putting it together and actually building that out. And then I want to focus a little bit on how to streamline your operations. Like, you and your team are so strong at the operational side and helping make sure that all the important critical parts are all buttoned up first as much as they can for success not including the external regulations and changes and everything else.
Right.
What are the 3 things that you think that most companies could do to help streamline their operations?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I guess for me, there were a couple of different parts, no priority order. The first was definitely outsourcing specific functions of our business that I didn't necessarily need in-house. So when I was starting this, I had a good understanding of business given my degree and some of my career paths leading up to this point. But, there's still this sort of assumption, I'll have HR and I'll have accounting and I'll have this and that. You don't necessarily need all of those things in-house, and outsourcing them can actually create a lot of efficiencies as far as streamlining your operations and just where my attention goes. As a CEO, I look at everything all day, every day. And, if I can have really strong partners covering certain bases in a way that lets me be pretty hands off, that's been hugely important to our streamlining and our ability to scale. I think on the technology side, my team will laugh. I implemented Slack, I think, in the fall, and I'm like, okay, everyone, we're moving towards this new system. It's called Slack. It's going to help us streamline our internal communications, but I don't want to overwhelm anyone. And they're all laughing like, great, she's finally emerged from the cave that she's been living in. We all know what Slack is. So I tend to be pretty late to the game on the technology side. I don't know why that is, but I'm working really, really hard to kind of overcome that personal limitation. But, Slack's just a small example, but it happened because I went from getting, I don't know, a few dozen emails to a few hundred emails a day. Yeah. And, my team just sending a quick question or this and that, just taking me 7 days to find that email. So small example, but there are platforms that really do make a huge difference. For us internally, that's been a great communication platform. We've also started using T-Sheets, which is a time tracking solution. Obviously, we have a lot of clients, so we're tracking our time, especially for clients on billable hours and stuff like that. But it's been interesting to, go through an exercise where I basically require my team to track everything that they're doing, whether it's internal or not. And it's given me a lot of data, or created a lot of data points surrounding where our time goes. I tracked my time for a week, and I'm pretty ashamed of where my time went. So you don't realize the little bottlenecks that you'll go down and the rabbit holes that you'll go down. And I was finding that at 5:00 at night, it was time for me to start the things I was supposed to do that day because everybody was kind of taking that time however they needed. And so I think that's kind of another piece of advice, really, go into each day with intention, and, be really clear about the things that you have to do and be unwavering about that, or it'll really chew away at any amount of free time that you could have when you operate the way that I was. And I try really hard to knock out the things in the morning that are going to be most pressing. And I try to stay off my email and stay off of everything until those major things are done, because the day will obviously just be taken from you as it goes. So, so technology, use of third parties. And then I think, being really clear about where you're going for it, whether it's for the day, week, month, year, quarter, however you want to measure it. Because if you understand that roadmap and you're very intentional about setting it, it'll make it easier for you to say no to the distracting things that pop up every day, that aren't really serving you your big picture and where you want to be.
All of those are so important. I was actually at a client event last night and got into a conversation with 2 people about time management and tracking and how it's so important. The rocks and the sand and the water was one analogy, and then eating the frog or eating the elephant a bite at a time was another one. So it's definitely a theme. I worked in a digital agency before I started my own business, and we had to track all our time. And I was exactly the same way as you, is that I had so many meetings and people who needed to talk to me and questions that needed to be answered that, 5:00, 6:00, when everyone started to go home was when I would actually start my own work, which was, to your point, shameful. Yeah. That's not how it's supposed to be.
Definitely. Well, it's nice that there's other people that do that. I mean, all of this advice comes with a grain of salt and a smile, because I'm still going to make the same mistakes tomorrow that I'm saying right now you shouldn't make, because, we're all kind of learning, and I'm learning how to be a CEO. I'm also learning how this industry works, which changes every day. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of learning. And I think, above all of this advice, be kind to yourself and acknowledge that you're learning, if that's where you are in your, in your career and on your journey. Like, don't beat yourself up for not getting all this right. I mean, it took me, like I said, this is our 4th year. It took me 4 years to get Slack incorporated into our business. Like, stupid things that really could have made a big difference years ago that I just really didn't know anything about. So I think it's important to kind of, be kind to yourself, honor what you're doing, pat yourself on the back a little, and realize that these tips and these changes don't happen overnight. It'll take time for you to really understand the best ways to streamline and create more automation for yourself and your team.
Absolutely. Now, what are your thoughts about creating, whether it's standard operating procedures or processes for teams to use? Do you rely on those? Do you create those for your clients? How do you fit those in? Because if we're looking at the people and the technology, I also want to talk about the processes for a minute.
Yeah. It's really funny. I was laughing with my team a week or so ago that we're so good at developing standard operating procedures for our clients. Way better at doing that than we are internally, which I laugh. I think most service providers could relate to that sentiment, where, our job, really, our entire business is built on making sure our clients' needs are met. And sometimes that means that your needs as a business come second. So it actually wasn't until the last 6 months where I had people on full-time staff that are committed to our business. They don't touch our clients. They're not client facing. They're committed to our growth and our strategic operations. And it's been a pretty big game changer when you realize how setting those procedures just saves you so much time. There's a lot of things that we were doing that historically just lived in my head. No one really knew why we were doing them. And, people were just sort of following along without challenging the procedure because no one quite knew what it was. So it's absolutely worth it. And I definitely believe that getting it down on paper, and getting it down in practice works better sometimes than just going right into technology. I've watched a lot of companies, they're using like 10 or 15 apps now to manage all these things. And like, that might not be the right solution either. So for us, it's definitely a combination. And we found that identifying a problem and trying to get it down and talk through it and figure out what the procedure needs to be, and then finding the supplemental technology that can solve that problem, that's been a much better approach. Otherwise, I think you can be very top heavy and have a lot of overlap between, these systems. There's so many out there now. Like I said, I'm very averse to using them, but I think that you can get away with a few really high functioning ones if you've spent the time analyzing your problem in the first place.
Absolutely. And if it's something that's really quick and it's a process that lives in my head, what I've started using to help train people is a software. It's a plugin to Chrome called Loom, Loom, and you can actually show your desktop, record if you want to have your picture in the middle, like on the bottom side, you can do that. But it also it records your audio and it records your process as you do stuff.
That's
so
cool.
It'll share your screen, and then it's just a video. So if I have I had some client reporting that I needed to train someone on, I just explained it, recorded it as I did it, and, walked them through the steps. I had a written document as well, but that way it just reduced the amount of time and it got it out of my head. So
I like that.
I highly recommend that one.
Good tip.
Even though it's technology, it's so easy to use, and it just it gets it out of my head quickly, which is sometimes the most important part. Your advice has been great, by the way. Kira's here and said, thank you for all the insights, as well as Julie is saying very informative, valuable insights as well. So it's awesome to hear this information is helpful to everyone. And so one thing that so you mentioned you went through people, process, and technology and how companies can use that to streamline operations. I think those are all, your tips are really great, and it's really important information. Do you think it differs at all, or do you see any difference between maybe someone who's not quite in the startup mode, but maybe someone who's been in the industry for a while and are looking to scale? Or do you think the tips are pretty much the same kind of things?
I think that they're probably similar. And it also depends really where you are in the space, right? So we have clients in California that, they've been in the cannabis world for 15 years, running cannabis businesses, but there's a pretty steep learning curve for them right now to transition from the way they've been operating previously to the way that they need to operate now. So their ability to scale and the things that they need to be focusing on are kind of different. Where we have groups on the East Coast that a lot of them have extensive healthcare experience or business experience, that have zero cannabis experience. So their ability to scale is going to rest on bringing in, the right people that can potentially cut down on that learning curve time, and also help them, maybe dodge some of those beginner mistakes. We've looked at a number of, I'm trying to think of good examples, but, one that comes to mind, we've looked at a lot of facility plans, and because we've seen so many and we've been in so many environments that we've either co-designed or audited afterwards, we're pretty well versed in seeing where inefficiencies lie in the layout of the building. So if you're starting a new facility in Maryland, it would behoove you to hire somebody that understands how to actually lay out one of these facilities in a hyper efficient way. Also knowing that putting a hallway in the wrong place can cost you like $1 million a year in yield if you're just not thinking that through. And, newer operators, there's no way they would know that on their own. So I think that understanding where your weaknesses are, being really honest with yourself, and then plugging those holes, whether it's through technology or by bringing the right people, that's kind of key to scaling. The other part for me is, you can't stop learning. Whether you're reading, you're attending events, for me, it's constantly trying to surround myself with the 10 people that are going to push me to be smarter and better and faster and all of that. And, if you're really looking to scale, put the people around you that can help you see those weaknesses, and take the feedback, be really open to it. We're in a place now as a company where we interview our clients. They think they're interviewing us, and they are to a degree, but we're interviewing them right back because I don't want to sign on with clients that are not willing to be really critical of themselves and take those critiques and put them into action. I think a lot of people, especially if you've spent 6 months designing your perfect business plan, it can be really difficult when someone comes in and starts poking holes in that. So part of scaling to me is letting people see what you've created and being, very open about people evaluating that, so that you can be better. The other part, like we talked about earlier, is delegating. I think that it was hard for me to know what to delegate because I didn't realize how much I was hoarding. But when you do start tracking your time and you see like, wow, I was going to say a 40-hour work week, but that's not real. In a 70-hour work week, this is what I was actually doing. And then you start realizing like, okay, I am not the person that should be on our social media accounts, and I'm not the person who should be updating this and that. So that's a really helpful piece of advice that I got, and it directly impacts our ability to scale because as a CEO, my job is to look ahead and plan for the future and make sure that the road that we're on is taking us to where we want to go. And when you're figuring out the design of a Facebook post on a Wednesday afternoon, like that's not really moving the needle. So make sure that your key people, yourself included, are have the space every day and every week to actually focus on that roadmap and that vision, because again, establishing that will help you turn away the clients or turn away the opportunities or whatever it is that are not actually moving you towards, that goal, that outcome.
It is so easy to get distracted on all the new things. all the shiny objects. I used to have a manager who we would say was outside catching butterflies, because like there would be another idea and there would be another idea. Like, stop, we're still on the first one. We haven't proven that out yet. Nothing's getting done if you're focused all over the place. I just want to say hi to Kate from San Diego, who's here, as well as Hannah from St. Louis. So welcome, you guys. Feel free to jump in and ask any questions in the chat if you have them, as we continue talking to Ashley. So we've talked about delegating, so it's a great lead in to talking about how do you hire the right team. And I want to combine that with company culture, because a lot of people really worry they're going to lose the soul of their business if they hire the wrong person, especially as they start to grow larger. So how were you able to hire the right team? Let's start with you.
I am really lucky. I'm super, super lucky. I have an amazing team. I don't know what would happen if I didn't have the team that I have. They're unparalleled. They're amazing. But, it's not easy. And no, I haven't made all great hires. There have been some not so great hires along the way. And, it's a little bit of trial and error to kind of figure that out. So, my first piece of advice, and something that's really resonated with me, is hiring for culture and hiring for personality and attitude above all else. So I don't really care anymore if you are the world's greatest cultivator, and you probably aren't, because everyone thinks they're the world's greatest cultivator. But I care a lot more about, your work ethic, and are you going to show up for me, and are you going to show up for our clients above and beyond, your day to day? And I'm literally, there's a flood of thoughts coming through my head right now, moments where my team stepped into things that were so far out of their scope of work, their job descriptions, like middle of the night, weekends. I mean, Chelsea and our team, we had a huge deadline. She had a family dinner and she left, was in the car on like a hot spot doing stuff that we needed her to do. So I didn't, it happens. We're in client services. There's, like we talked about, there's definite curveballs every single day. And so having the people that are around you that are going to show up and kind of leave it all on the line, that's the most important. And to me, especially in cannabis, where having cannabis experience is important, we have a lot of that on our team. But you can teach a lot about cannabis, where you can't really teach attitude and work ethic. It's kind of, you have it or you don't. We're a pretty small team. We're 10 full-timers. We have a few part-time staff, and then we have a lot of contractors. So we still are pretty small, and I guess keeping the culture hasn't been too straining yet. But our challenge really is, how do you keep culture when an entire staff is exhausted and depleted, and, are on their fifth major push in 6 weeks? I mean, that's happened. So for me, it's about understanding each person that works for you and what motivates them. Yes. For some people, it'll be monetary. For others, it's words of affirmation and just letting them know that you see them. For other people on my team, it's quirky gifts, and I've got someone on our team a really awesome jacket, because she's been crushing it, and she's been going to all these meetings, and she's this powerhouse businesswoman out of nowhere, and it's amazing to watch. It's I think those little things really matter, when you can show the people around you that you acknowledge it, you see what they're doing, it's not gone unnoticed, and it doesn't always have to be, the big payout, especially when you're a small company. That can be really difficult to do. So I encourage small company owners to really look at, what matters to each of those people, and then deliver in that way. And I think that's been a huge part of creating culture. We're also, we do a lot together. I mean, if you think about it, you spend more time with your team than you do with pretty much anyone else. I spend more time with these people than my family, anyone else really in my life. So I agree with that. And it's an ongoing effort for sure.
Absolutely. Julie just said that it's passion, right? It's passion, it's understanding, and it's paying attention.
Definitely.
Right? That's where empathy comes in, where it's not just like a hot word to use, is being able to understand and listen. And you said being able to understand what motivates and what's important to each person. I had an employee that twice a week, he would come in at the end of the day and just sit down in my office just to check in and say hi. And when he was there, if I was still typing or trying to get stuff done, because 5 o'clock was my time, he would sit there and just wait for me to put everything down and focus on him. And all he needed was 10 minutes. That was it. That's all he wanted. And that helped. It helped. And it's something that, it took me a while to recognize it and not be irritated by it. But it's so important. Yeah. If 10 minutes is all it takes to keep him happy and motivated, I am all over that. So being able to understand and recognize that is huge. Do you have...
And encourage your other leaders to do that too, because, it's out of the gate. Everyone rolled up to me. This idea that we have an org chart is still something I'm getting used to. It's pretty cool when you start to see that come together. But it's also empowering your other managers, directors, etc., to, continue that all the way down, so that it's constant. And I think not everyone now works directly for me. A lot of people don't get as much FaceTime or time in person with me anymore, especially because of my travel schedule. So it's making sure that the other people around you can autonomously continue that momentum and, understand Bud, hey, here, I want you to buy everyone, take care of your team, buy everyone lunch, let people leave early today because it's been 5 days of craziness. I don't know. It's those kinds of things. And then the other piece I was going to add as far as the actual hiring process, at this point, everyone on my team basically interviews new candidates. So the person who's actually going to manage that person is the one conducting kind of the behavioral interview. I'm huge into behavioral interview questions because I really want to see how your brain works. So notorious for asking things that have absolutely nothing to do with your job or anything. I just want to see, are you creative? Do you have a sense of humor? Can you figure things out on the fly? But beyond that, at this point, we're a very small team. We work like crazy people and it's very sink or swim environment. There's not a lot of hand holding. I want to keep the team small. Therefore, there's no micromanagement here. So you're going to thrive or not. And I think that the greater team meeting every new candidate is another nice way to make sure that you have that cultural fit, and that the candidate understands the environment that they're, potentially coming into.
What is the weirdest interview question you've ever asked somebody?
Oh my God, I'm thinking about a bunch right now. So before, when I was graduating from college, I wanted to go into management consulting, which is funny because it's come full circle. But basically there was a couple of consulting firms at the time that had massive case study interview processes. And I think everyone's probably heard the how many ping pong balls can you fit on a Boeing 787? One of the questions I got was, you're a taxi driver at JFK Airport, New York. You just dropped off a passenger. Do you go back to New York City to look for another passenger? Or do you get in the airport cab queue and wait for a new passenger? And it's that's all they give you because there is no right answer. It's just how do you process information and weigh the options that you have. So I've used a lot of them from my interview prep that I went through out of college. And it's just funny. I mean, it's funny to just see people, where they'll take it. In the end, there is no right answer. I just want to know, can you process new information quickly? Because the things our clients throw at us, there's no textbook for this. I don't know. We know a lot, but we tell all our clients this. Anyone who's telling you they're an expert you should run away from them because it's not a real thing yet. The industry's not old enough to have experts in that way. So if you're not able to keep learning and figuring things out on the fly, at least at my company, you will not succeed here.
No, that's awesome. I love it because whenever I can't get a pinpoint, if there's something about a person that I'm interviewing and it's not quite I can't put my finger on it, my questions just get crazier until they give me the insight that I need. Okay, that's what I was looking for. That's where my red flag was. Perfect. Yeah, and they just get crazier. So I love that you've spent all this time with us. There's been so many great and fantastic tips that you've given. I do have one more question for you, and it's about your book, because it's a fabulous book.
Awesome.
And you guys haven't read it, you need to go onto Amazon and download it. It is a fantastic book. Ashley went and interviewed and met with women in the industry and then wrote about their stories and what she learned and the insights. What inspired you to write that book? Because it's a huge undertaking. And it's very impressive.
It was a massive undertaking. The long and short of it, I went to South by Southwest in 2016, and I was just an attendee there and went to a lot of sessions. For those of you who haven't heard of South by or been, it's incredible. You should look it up. It's just a really awesome event for your whole body, brain, wellness. Like, there's so many things going on. And when I was there, I just said to myself, like, I'm 100% getting a panel accepted here next year. Everyone thought I was nuts because A, it's really difficult to do that, and B, they weren't really having cannabis panels at the time. But nonetheless, submitted a panel. It was accepted. It was called Breaking the Glass Ceiling, and the panel discussion was oriented around 4 women. I was moderating. I had 3 other women accompany me, and the discussion was really about getting into the space as a woman and, the opportunities that exist for women in the industry. So I think I heard about the panel getting accepted at the end of maybe it was the end of 2016. And I thought, okay, maybe it'd be interesting to get a book in the bookstore, because if you speak at South by, you can put a book there. And from there became a 45-day crazy undertaking to do all these interviews, write it, publish it, do the artwork, and get it to South by before they're cut off to get books on the shelf. So the book actually came together in just under 45 days. Would not advise anyone to do that ever. But pretty happy with how it turned out. I hear from people all the time with, compliments, and also like, hey, there's this spelling or grammar thing happening on this page. I'm like, yeah, well, 45 days, we'll do that. So why did I want to do it? I felt like at that point, when I got into the space, there were a lot of women in my life, most notably my mom probably, who did not understand why I was moving in this direction career-wise. And, that was stemming more from her misconceptions about what this industry was and what it wasn't. So I thought, okay, women in most municipalities, and I think in this movement in general, women are kind of the gatekeepers in some ways, where if women are not supportive of this, they're going to work really, really hard to block cannabis legislation from happening or to kind of fight this along the way. And I also thought a book is a really, it's a safe way to learn about a topic that's been very polarizing. So got featuring 21 women who have come into the space through totally different paths. We had a scientist, a doctor, consultants, business owners, kind of the whole gamut, an artist. I was trying to show there's a lot of different paths to get into this. So you definitely don't need to open a dispensary. You can really, look at your own skill set and open something related and complementary. But I also wanted it to be an approachable way to learn about an industry that a lot of people were very concerned about. So that was the impetus for it. And then I guess the last piece is, unfortunately, and this continues to today, a lot of women who started companies in the earlier years of the industry are losing their companies right now. And, I think there's a lot of media attention on women thriving in the space and this being an industry that's great for women. And I don't want to be the naysayer of that. I think there's some truth to it, but I also think that a lot of that is inflated and a lot of these numbers are not necessarily substantiated. And so at this point, a couple of the women in the book, I think there's 4 or 5 of them, are actually not running the businesses that they were running when I wrote that book.
Oh,
so
no.
I say that to shine a big light on, an issue that's still happening now, and to make sure that women are armed with as much information as be so that they don't wind up in that boat themselves. And what I was probably most moved by was the honesty that many of these women shared and their stories that they shared in the book about the mistakes that they made that resulted in them winding up in that position. That's not easy to do, obviously, and it can be very painful to kind of relive that. But I felt like they were extremely gracious and sharing those stories to make sure other women didn't, find themselves in a similar boat. So it was lots of reasons for writing it, but it's been a fun journey, and it's opened a lot of doors and allowed me to meet a lot of other kind of amazing women in the space.
It's really amazing. And actually, don't just take my word for it. Hannah is here from St. Louis, and she said that she loves the book. And Jolie sent a shout out. Jolie sent a shout out that she thinks there's more than one book in your future. I can't get over the 45 days. Like, that's unbelievable. But it's just, I think your point also is that it adds another level of importance for women in this industry and women in general to support each other and whatever our endeavors are, because it really, to your point, can help shape an industry, but also, shape the world. So it's really, really important to continue supporting each other and all of these things. So thank you for putting all of that in your book and publishing it in the insane amount of 45 days.
Thank you.
Okay.
And you're welcome.
You guys, quick questions. Ashley, speed round. What are your favorite cannabis products?
I'm a big pre-roll person. I recently tried the Dosis pen, which I really liked, but primarily I smoke all indicas. I have to stay far away from sativas because they make me a little crazy. But I pretty much use cannabis nightly for sleep. I've had sleep issues my whole life. So, as heavy and sedative as possible on the flower side.
I hear you on that. I have a spray I use every night.
There you go.
Do you have, so we've talked a lot about business and where people can fit in and scaling their business and growing. Do you have any networking events or conferences that you recommend for people that you've gone to that really stand out?
Yeah, I think, so there's so many conferences now in the cannabis space, it can be a little daunting to figure out where to go and expensive to try and get to all of them. I think that there's definitely networking opportunities that you can access from home. Women entrepreneurs in cannabis is definitely like the greatest resource in my opinion. Kira is the best. So I've gotten so much out of that, and the way that it's organized and the forums allow for you to kind of connect with the people that you need to find. And there's a lot of information there about the events too. If you're a scientist, you should be going to the Cannabis Science Conference. If you're, looking at something more specific, I feel like the conferences are starting to be more tracked, which is nice to help people get the information they need. I also am a huge advocate for, trying to attend things that have nothing to do with the space. So I mentioned South by earlier. I was fortunate enough to attend the Summit in LA, this past fall. And those events have nothing to do with cannabis at all, but you're meeting brilliant people that are doing cool things in other fields. And I think that there's cannabis is special, but it's another industry, and there's a lot of commonality between cannabis and all of these other business industries. So you'd be crazy to think this operates in a vacuum. So I've gotten a lot, from a personal growth standpoint out of going to other like leadership conferences and understanding, what's going on in tech or what's going on in entertainment or whatever, because the parallels are there. There's a lot of overlap.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I just finished a week at Social Media Marketing World, which means all of you are in luck because there will be more videos. I know I'm a total book geek, but are there any books or publications that you're currently reading right now in all your free time? I
mean, I love the Missouri regulations, and the Maryland regulations are also really just absolutely riveting. Others, I'm notorious for reading too many books at once. Just weird way my brain works.
I do that too.
I'm reading Becoming right now, so Michelle Obama's book.
So good.
I read a lot of historic. Is it good? I'm just starting it, but I can't imagine it wouldn't be good. Another one I love, I read it a while ago, I just read it again recently, is called The One Thing. And it's an excellent read for anyone starting a company or operating a company, because it goes back to that sentiment that we talked about earlier with knowing, like, what are you trying to accomplish and where are you going? If you don't know where you're going, the steps you'll take every day, I mean, they might be the right ones, but the chances of you misstepping are obviously much higher. And so I remember when I was a teacher, one of the first things that you do at the beginning of the year is actually write your final exams, because you're tracking towards an outcome at the end, and that's the goal. Everyone passes this exam. So of course that makes sense. It would drive all of your curriculum. And I think that there's a lot we can be doing as business owners to get to the same point, knowing, at the end of 2019, I want to be able to say XYZ. Now you can break that into quarters, and now you can break it into months and weeks and days, and it'll start to help you make better decisions. Yeah. But the one thing is it's a great read as far as preventing against the shiny object syndrome thing that we talked about, and just reminding you of, what is that one thing, and if the action in front of you is not tying back to that, you don't do it. So I got a lot out of it, because I think cannabis has a lot of opportunities, and they can be very distracting if you're not focused.
Oh yeah, that's I've heard that book before. I haven't read it, so I just added it to my list. And the last question, because I know we ran longer today, so thank you for your time. But the last question I have is, where can people find you if they want to connect with you and your team?
Yeah, so our website for sure, which is point7group.com. You can certainly add me on social media. It's at point7group. My personal handle on Instagram is just at Ashley Picillo. You'll see a lot of pictures of my dog, amongst other things, and he's really cute if you need to pick me up.
He is cute.
Email's great too. Yeah, so I'm Ashley at point7group.com. I do my best to get back to everyone that I hear from, but it's a little scary in the inbox these days too. So if you don't hear from me, be patient. I'll definitely circle back with you for sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you for all your time today. Thank you guys who stuck through and watched all of this. Ashley had some amazing information for everyone. All right, you guys, we're signing off. Thank you again for being here, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for having me.